Whenever I think of microplastics, I think of smaller plastics compared to the normal plastics.
Small plastics.
Plastic straws.
Microplastic, water.
Water bottles.
They're in the water, they're in the food.
Something that has to do with science.
I don't think of much.
The first word that comes to mind is small plastics, maybe. Lower than usual.
I'm Dodie Sanders. I'm a marine educator and boat captain for the University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. So microplastics are plastics that are less than 5 millimeters in size. That's kind of the working definition. It could be a fiber, it could be a fragment, it could be a film. Of course, microplastics are everywhere. They're in the atmosphere, they're in the soil, they're in the polar ice caps, they're everywhere. So what we're doing today is we're sampling for microplastics in the water. We're right now in the Wilmington River, a fairly populated area. We started a community scientist monitoring program. And so we take surface samples. For every sample that we take about 4 liters of river water. And we run that water through a series of sieves. So once we pour that water sample through, we capture any plastics that are in that size. From there, we rinse with deionized water, place them into vials that have been muffled at high temperatures, and then take them to community scientists like Dr. Brandis at the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography, process them and analyze them for microplastics.
My name's Brandis. I'm a professor at the University of Georgia. So I'm in the Department of Marine Sciences. I study the chemistry of the oceans and microplastics. So what do we do with her samples? One of the ways, simply to look at them under a microscope. You would filter it like you saw out there in the field. And we had a variety of citizen volunteers. And they would sit under the microscope and they would count them. And they would look for things that look like plastics. And that's as far as we could get for a while. But around 2020, the National Science Foundation funded a special type of instrument called a Raman microscope that allows you to target one of the things that you think might be a microplastic. It hits it with a laser beam. And basically the light from the laser interacts with the sample. It will present you with a spectrum. Without this type of microscope, it just looks like a blue thread. And you don't know if it's plastic or not. We've been counting these things as marine debris, but we're now able to kind of bring it to that next level.
So the sources of microplastics come from a couple different things. Primary plastics are pre-production plastics like nurdles that they make water bottles out of or plastic containers. There's also secondary sources, which are basically the breakdown of larger macroplastics. So if you think of, say, a styrofoam cup or your fleece jacket, that breaking down over time into smaller and smaller pieces. The sources of the microplastics come from a number of things. Runoff from local lands, that's one possible source.
However, there's a lot of other ways that things can get into the environment. We've found a lot are thread-like, and these seem to be coming from clothing. Anybody that has washed clothes in the dryer, you end up with this lint. That's little tiny pieces of the fibers that are in your clothes. It happens in the washer too. It gets carried out in the water and down the drain and off to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's one way you get microplastic. And then the other is they can break off from larger things. Capturing plastics before they get to the ocean, before they get to the point where they've broken down into tiny pieces is critical.
So plastics impact marine life in a number of ways. If you think of fishing line, it could entangle small invertebrates like blue crabs. If you think about water bottles and fishing net washing up to the beach, that could interfere with habitat structures. For instance, when sea turtles come on shore to nest, that might interfere with that process.
Hello, my name is Nikki Thomas. I'm the Education Program Manager here at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. So the Georgia Sea Turtle Center is the only sea turtle rehabilitation facility in Georgia. Our job is to take in sick and injured sea turtles, help them get better, and then our favorite part of our job is getting them back out to the wild. Marine debris can be a really big impact in sea turtles, and we have a lot of cases of sea turtles caught on fishhook. A few years ago, we had about 20 cases of sea turtles caught on fishhook just within one summer. Sometimes those hooks are just out there. Other times they're actually attracted to areas where there are people and are attracted to bait and pulled up on fishhook. Well, in general, we know that plastic pollution accounts for a lot of challenges that wildlife face. So not just sea turtles, but a variety of wildlife, mainly in terms of ingestion. So floating plastic out in the ocean for a lot of animals, when they eat them, it makes them feel full, so they stop eating. Specifically with sea turtles, they are living in an area called the Sargasso Sea. The Sargasso Sea is the only part of the ocean that is made up of current borders. But because of that, there's a lot of rotation and movement of plastic into that area. The Sargasso Sea is a nursery ground for young and growing sea turtles, in addition to a lot of other wildlife. Generally speaking, we know that very few hatchlings actually make it to adulthood. A sea turtle will lay lots of eggs at one time, but they don't actually provide any care for their young. And then once those hatchlings emerge, only a handful of them will probably survive to adulthood. But extra human impacts out in the ocean can impact the amount of diseases that we see in sea turtles. So one story in particular that I'd like to share with you is of a little sea turtle, a very small juvenile sea turtle, came into our hospital. He was in a really, really rough shape, just skin and bones on arrival. And unfortunately, after a few weeks in our care, he did pass. When we opened Grayson up, we found that he had actually ingested lots of pieces of plastic. This little container here filled with the plastic that we found inside his stomach. We determined that Grayson actually passed away due to starvation. And this is not unique to Grayson. There are animals every single day that don't make it because they've ingested so much plastic that's out there in the environment. They succumb to natural causes. Grayson's story really reminds me every day that we can make really big impacts and have a giant ripple effect out in the wild with our everyday choices. I think about his story really frequently and how I use plastics, and I hope that you will as well.
I'm Taylor Madeline. I'm a PhD student and the director of the Circularity Assessment Protocol, working with the GenVet Research Group at the University of Georgia. There are many shocking experiences when you work in the world of waste. One of my most impactful field experiences was in Chennai, India in 2019. We visited an extremely poorly managed landfill that has waste pickers that were in and among the waste. There were fires, there were landslides. You could see the waste coming out and ultimately making its way to the ocean. Just outside of the landfill, there are informal waste villages, and they will sort all of the waste items that they find. And there was an entire bag the size of me that was just toothbrushes. Just think that every toothbrush that you have ever used, back to the Flintstones ones from when you were little, are all still out there somewhere because plastic takes so long to break down. Ultimately, wherever you live, there is an opportunity for your waste or your impact to be felt in the ocean. Everywhere in the world falls within a watershed, and any drop of water that falls anywhere on that land ultimately flows to some body of water that ultimately flows to the ocean.
My name is Kevin Kershaw. I serve as Director of Sustainability for the University of Georgia. We're sitting here at Trail Creek. This trash shack project was to capture litter so we can remove it from the environment before it makes its way downstream and ultimately contributing to the significant and overwhelming problem of ocean plastics. Trail Creek is a tributary of the North Oconee River. The North Oconee combines with the Middle Oconee River and flows south and east of Athens to join up with the Ocmulgee to form the Altamaha River and ultimately enters the Atlantic Ocean near Darien, Georgia. When we litter, we often don't think about the fact that litter on the ground, when it rains, washes into storm drains, comes out the end of the pipe, which usually is in a natural waterway. Litter on our roadways, sidewalks, outside of businesses, ends up in this watershed in Trail Creek. As it washes down the creek, it floats on the surface of the water and is collected in the trap. This one point source along Trail Creek, over the last 6 months, we've removed 111 pounds of litter. We then empty them and remove them from the waterway before they can degrade and come into microplastics. What we'll see is about 4 months of litter accumulated in the trap. So soon we'll be able to remove those items and see how many pounds of plastic and other materials have ended up washed into this watershed. Yeah, so when we empty the trap, we sort the contents, we count the different individual items. We're documenting that in the debris tracker app that was developed here at UGA. We use that data to try to identify where is this litter coming from and what are some effective solutions to address litter at the point source and keep it from ending up in the environment to begin with.
The Marine Debris Tracker app is a free open source citizen science app that anyone around the world can download to track the litter in their own community. And what it does is it really puts easy, accessible, understandable data in the hands of people that are trying to make change on the ground. So I do this even when I'm walking my dog sometimes. I'll track the litter that I see in my own community and you can see what are the top items that you're seeing. It is an easy, sort of fun way for anyone in the world to get involved in collecting data, similar to the Debris Tracker app. One of the really cool things about the Athens Trash Trap is it lets us know what is the most prevalent item that's ending up in the environment, and it helps us to answer why that's ending up there.
For us, the goal is to come up with effective solutions, outreach that can result in less plastic in the environment, keep it from entering our waterways, creating harmful effects on wildlife and humans downstream.
My name is George Webster. I'm one of the citizen scientist volunteers here at MERICS in the Marine Debris Collection and Data Project, in which teams of us go out and walk along the shoreline, either marshes or the ocean, and collect any kind of debris. And we use the app to document. Personally, the last time I went out, I saw more Mylar balloons than I've ever seen. It's a real problem, people. They go up and they have to come down.
So we're currently working with not only Georgia shrimpers, but South Carolina shrimpers. We're doing programs at local boys and girls clubs. We're working with a lot of different community members, from eco tour guides to recreational boaters. One of the community members that we have involved are South Carolina and Georgia shrimpers. And they actually make bags out of old shrimp net material. This net would be discarded in the environment or would be not recycled. So the shrimpers construct what we call stow bags, and then we disseminate them among the community. The Trawl to Trash project is a great program that reaches a very diverse group of people.
I'm Herbert Truck McIver. I've been a shrimper all my life until I came here to work. I'm a captain of the Georgia Bulldog, a marine resource specialist. Plastic disinfects the whole ocean, really. I was in charge of all of that and getting the guys, like the shrimpers and all, involved in making them in order to maintain the beaches, be able to pick up trash, have something to put them in. We just sent over like 300 the other day and they distributed a different one. Everybody do things a little different. At the end, all of them are basically the same.
So it's material that would be normally thrown away anyway. I mean, it's still good netting, just not for pulling with the shrimp boat.
We take them to people on the beaches, boat ramps. They've definitely been using them. We made like 1,000.
the Trawl to Trash initiative, we're taking something that actually has a huge hand in sea turtle conservation and tying it back into the ecosystem as a way to actually collect trash and recycle a material. So we as humans have a great responsibility to take action to help reduce our consumption of plastic.
We're already getting to the point where within 10 years we're going to have more plastic in the oceans than the amount of fish.
Until we curtail the plastic production, the plastic usage, and perhaps alternatives to plastics, this is just going to be a growing global issue, not just in our backyard, but all over the globe.
We have to tackle the problem at the source. Government doesn't really do anything unless it's pushed into doing it. So it requires people to actually make this an important issue.
Coming up with small steps that can become habits in everyday life can make a really big impact. There's something that each and every one of us can do. We don't all have to eliminate plastics completely.
We grew up with the 3 R's: reduce, recycle, reuse. But there's other things that we can do. We can take a proactive approach to using alternatives to plastic, whether it's glass or aluminum or metal.
There are so many, especially plastic items, that we just don't necessarily need in our lives. And there's so many ways, even beyond plastic, ways of just reducing our consumption. There's lots of opportunities for refill and reuse. There's lots of opportunities to thrift clothing or reuse clothing instead of doing fast fashion. You can buy locally and not depend on shipping and packaging as much.
There have been some remarkable stories out there of just little small groups making progress in terms of cleaning up their own little plastic problem. There's a school in Florida that, for example, the children managed to get their cafeteria to remove disposable plastic materials from their cafeteria. So it's that little, action.
One of the things that I think gives me hope about working in the plastic space is that plastic only really became a common and popular material within the last century. It's global, it's visible, it's harmful, it's scary in a lot of different ways, but ultimately it is a solvable problem. If we've created this problem in the last 70 years, I feel confident we should be able to get rid of it in the next 70 years, if not sooner than that.